Okay, welcome everyone to this Q&A at St. Charbel's retreat at Stanwell Tops. I'd just like to welcome Robert Haddad, who now we can call Dr. Robert Haddad, who just recently got his PhD. His PhD in apologetics. Apologetics. So we congratulate Robert on this, because it's an amazing achievement. And I'm sure he'll do us proud today again, like he always does. Welcome, Robert.
It was just the other day I was here doing this, and which was a great thing. Really, you have to be congratulated, the organisers of this event and those who participate, because I'm a huge believer in these type of events, irrespective of the size. To see 80 young people here together on a Sunday morning, when you could be doing something else, is extraordinary. Now, last time I was here just a couple of months ago, I actually looked through the questions in advance and I ranked them. I'm not going to do it this time. I'm going to be totally random. There's a lot of questions here. I don't know if I get through every question, because I like to answer every question comprehensively. But I'm just going to pick it out, and if it's suitable, I'll answer it straight away. So here we go. What is the book of Hebrews saying about the priesthood? Essentially, what it's saying is that the author, we don't know. It's listed as the last book of St. Paul's canon. There's 13 epistles that traditionally we ascribe without doubt to St. Paul as the author. We put Hebrews, though, last, because we're not sure whether he wrote it or not. Origen, and a church father in the late 2nd, early 3rd century or mid 3rd century, perhaps speculated that it could have been written by St. Barnabas. I'm not an expert here. I tend to believe it was written by St. Paul, and writing to the Hebrews, he's showing how we're transitioned now from the Levitical priesthood, the priesthood set up by Moses, now to the one eternal priesthood of Melchizedek, of which Jesus Christ is the high priest. And that Christ did a once and for all sacrifice on Mount Calvary for humanity, and that supersedes all the sacrifices that previously the Jews conducted under as part of the Levitical priesthood. I'll just like to refer you to chapter 12 and chapter 13 of Hebrews. In chapter 12, the author gives us a brief description of heaven, in which he notes particularly that Jesus Christ is the mediator of the new covenant, and that his blood speaks louder than Abel's, which tells us that Christ in heaven is still priest. And at the right hand of the Father, he's not just a prayerful intercessor, but he's a priestly mediator, which means he continues to offer the once and for all sacrifice he did in time on Mount Calvary to the Father in heaven. And that's what the Mass makes present. When you were at the Mass this morning, you were mystically present to what Jesus Christ is doing now in heaven, being priest and offering sacrifice to the Father. But as priest in heaven, Christ is not offering a new or additional sacrifice to what he did on Mount Calvary. He's offering essentially what he did on Mount Calvary in a sacramental form to the Father. And that sacrifice is made present to us. So the Mass is heaven touching earth. We're present to that event, and we can receive as a gift, not just the Eucharist itself, but we receive Christ's own sacrifice as a gift, which we could offer to the Father for our intentions. Now that's a pretty deep statement, okay? The other thing in chapter 13, the author says, unlike the Jews, I'm paraphrasing here, we have an altar to which those who serve the tent cannot eat its sacrifices, which means Christians are distinct from Jews. We have an altar, and we have a sacrifice, and we can eat its sacrifices, that is the Eucharist. And we're eligible to eat the Eucharist because we're followers of Jesus Christ. We've been baptized, and that distinguishes us from those who serve the tent, which is a phrase for the Jews. Okay, so that basically sums that one up. All right. Could I just have a glass of water? I had too many peanuts just before I started the first question. I won't blame my friends in front of me. It was purely my fault. Okay. Can you explain chivalry and how men can exercise this today? With a big please. Yeah, chivalry needs to be restored. It's just really about good custom, manners, civilization, graciousness. In our culture today, we're descending to uncivility, vulgarity, brutality, insults, aggression. And we don't like to be gracious anymore. See, egalitarianism has its benefits because we're all equal in dignity. But at the same time, it wipes out some beautiful cultural, social, and gender distinctions. Men and women are actually different. Yes, we're equal as children of God, natural and supernatural children of God. Yes, we are equal in our humanity. Thanks very much. Excuse me, neither men or women are superior over the other, but we are different, and the differences are good, and they're meant to be encouraged, and the differences introduce mystery between man and woman, and attraction between man and woman, and that man and woman are meant to be complementary. Chivalry, in the case of men, I presume this is a male asking this question, is meant to civilize the man, so that the man is not just a brute, vulgar beast, aggressive and a domineering character, but is gracious, acknowledging that the woman's beauty and her fairness, etc., that yes, she's weaker physically, but not intellectually, socially, or spiritually, I assure you. Okay, weaker physically, and that men have a natural role here to complement that relative physical weakness and be gracious to women. Show good manners, like stand up and offer, your seat to a woman, or push the chair behind, tuck the chair in behind the woman as she's about to sit, or open the door for a woman. Now, that is beautiful, but today's culture, hyperfeminism, would say, oh, listen, this is condescending, this is patriarchal, this is, chauvinistic, where men are displaying or trying to give the impression that they are superior to women, and that they must help women, and that women need this help because they're inferior. No. We need to bring back chivalry, but at the same time, we need to ensure that it doesn't decay to a form of machismo or aggressive male supremacy or superiority, which represses and offends or debilitates women in their dignity and their rights, etc. Okay. Then we have, is chewing gum after taking the Eucharist sinful? After taking the Eucharist, no. Because you can eat immediately and drink anything after receiving the Eucharist. I don't mean while you're still in Mass. You receive the Eucharist, the Mass concludes, there's the blessing, you go forth to love and serve the Lord. Once you're out of the church, you can eat and drink anything. It's about before. If you chew gum within that hour of abstinence and fasting, before receiving the Eucharist, then you've breached the Eucharistic fast. Okay, what does it say? If yes, why? If no, how? Okay. So chewing gum, I chew gum a lot more now than I used to a few years ago. I don't know, maybe I'm descending into childish habits here. But I tend to have a lot of gum at home. But I'd never have gum if I'm abstaining or fasting, say on a Friday or during Lent or the pre-Eucharistic fast. Okay, that would break the fast. I would have gum after Mass. Okay, yeah, no problem. No concern there whatsoever. What is a pseudopigraphical book? Hopefully I'm saying this correctly. Yeah, pseudopigraphical means false writings. Pseudo, false, writings that are allegedly written by an apostle, but they're forgeries. So here are the categories. We've got canonical books, which are books that are formally part of the Bible, as determined by the legitimate authority, the church. So we know that, 46 in the Old Testament, 27 in the New Testament. When you open your Bible, you see a page called Contents page. That didn't just fall out of heaven. That didn't write itself. There's nothing in the Bible that tells us what should be in the contents page of a Bible. The church determined that, as a legitimate authority established by Christ in the world. Apocryphal books are those that are meant to be hidden. Not hidden completely, but put in the back, so to speak, in the back shelf. So they're of value, but they're not considered sacred or inspired books by God. Now, Protestants consider the 7 extra books of the Old Testament as apocryphal. So if you buy a King James version of the Bible, for example, they'll have at the back what's called the Apocrypha. We don't consider their Apocrypha to be apocryphal. We consider that Apocrypha to be canonical. Right? Some of those books, the book of Baruch or Esther, or the 1st and 2nd Maccabees, Wisdom of Solomon, etc. I haven't captured all of them there, but that's most of them, and some extra chapters in the book of Daniel, whatever. Okay. Pseudopigraphical would be a book, for example, like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Mary, which are mostly Gnostic works. But they're pseudopigraphical because these forgeries were passed off as books written by apostles or evangelists or other figures close to Christ to give them an authority they did not rightfully deserve. Okay, to pass them off. Okay, well, you know, Thomas the Apostle, here it is, gives us another version of Jesus, etc. No, well, actually, Thomas didn't write that at all. It's a pseudopigraphical work. Hillsong music is okay to listen to in the car, but does it have a place in Mass? No, it doesn't. Because it's not Catholic music. You should have Catholic music for Catholic public worship. Okay? Though, not all Hillsong music, theologically, when you listen to the words, against Catholic teaching. Some of it might, and you might not be able to even discern that. Okay? You've got to be rather theologically acute to pick up all the subtle differences between Catholicism and Protestantism, or here Pentecostalism, for example. Now, I've heard some Hillsong music played at youth ministry events, and when you discern the words, you can say, hey, that's not against Catholic teaching. That actually is consistent with Catholic teaching. And the music can be attractive, okay, and inspirational, and gets you excited and hyped up about the faith, all well and good. But I don't think it's appropriate for formal worship of the church. Okay, we can't muck around with the liturgy. It doesn't belong to us as individuals. It belongs to the church as the body of Christ. And we've played enough with the liturgy too much over the since the mid 20th century, and we've reduced it and often to undignified events. When we know what the Mass is, as I said already, it's heaven touching earth, making present Mount Calvary and what Christ is doing in heaven right now, because they're essentially one and the same thing. Making that event present, the music should be consistent with the dignity of that, and should be reverential music, inspirational music, and music that's prayerful, and music that is consistent with Catholic teaching without any question. How can we practice femininity in our vocations? Singleness, marriage, etc. How can we practice femininity? I want to tell you something. Women, be women. Don't try to be men. Because most feminists, radical feminists who try to be men, actually try to be the bad side of manhood. Butch, aggressive, angry, vulgar. We don't want that. Be beautiful, be sweet, be gentle, be what God created you to be. Don't try to be like men, and men don't try to be like women. Because we are made by God to be different. I told you before, and I'll say it again. The differences are good. They're meant to be enhanced, to be amplified. We're trying to merge it all so we've got this, no distinction anymore between male and female, to allow males to become females and females to become males, and have 79 Facebook genders or whatever. It's interesting that coronavirus only affects 2 genders, no more than 2, men and women. All right? But here, again, it's because of our differences that mystery comes in between man and woman. And that the man and the woman look at each other with a sense of awe and a sense of attraction. And those differences draw the two together to complete each other. That's what a marriage would be. Oh, I don't know if I captured the next part of that question, I forgot it. All right, but anyway, let's go to the next one. What is one key piece of advice you can give to the maker in this room regarding marriage? To the mates in this room regarding marriage. You want just one piece of advice regarding marriage? Unselfishness. What kills most marriages that do end up in divorce? What brings tension in most marriages? What is the weak foundation on which most marriages are formed is selfishness. And I know this from experience. I speak from experience. You might be looking at someone who knows a bit, but you're not looking at someone who's necessarily a saint who's done it always perfectly well. It's selfishness that brings about the tension, that brings about the estrangement and the eventual collapse of so many marriages. You must go into marriage with agape love, that is a sacrificial love, that you love the other for their sake, for their greatness, for their eternal happiness, and that you're willing to serve, suffer, and sacrifice for the other. And both have to do it at the same time. It's not one-way traffic. It's not just the guys to do that. It's not just for the gals to do that. You have to do that at the same time, a mutual self-giving love, and that would create paradise on earth. Go one day in your marriage or your courtship where both of you are serving each other's needs. Serving, sacrifice, and suffering for each other, and you'll find out how happy you will be. And if you can do that for most days of your marriage, you have a supremely happy and holy marriage. How can we practice? Oh, I've done that one already. What is scrupulosity and how do we overcome it? Scrupulosity is a psychological disorder that affects your judgment about the severity of sin. So that minor faults become venial sins, and venial sins are mortal sins, and mortal sins are unforgivable sins. And you're always paranoid about, sinning, don't sin, avoid that, don't do this, don't say that. And when you do something wrong, it's a calamity, and I must go to confession straight away, blah, 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 etc., etc. You're looking at someone who had severe scrupulosity in 1989. June to August 1989, there was 1 week where I went to confession 5 times in 6 days. And the fundamental remote cause of scrupulosity is actually a misconception of God. That you focus too much on God as judge and punisher and condemner. I'm always worried about this, I've done that, I've done this, and I'm gonna end up going to hell as a consequence. That's not all wrong, but it's not all right. There's a massive imbalance there. You forgot God as the one who created you, who loves you, who redeems you, who wants to get to heaven. And that God's not an assassin. As soon as I sin, he's going to take me out. And I end up in hell. If you sin, you fall, okay. Understand that, like a good parent, God is a better parent than even our best parents. That he's not happy when we sin. He wants us to repent. He wants us to get up. And he's waiting and helping us to get up and recover. The best cure for scrupulosity is to enslave your will to an intelligent spiritual director. That's how I got out of scrupulosity in 1989. I had a friend in America who sent me a chapter of a book by Alphonse Tanqueray, The Spiritual Life. I still got the copy at home. I read that, I was cured almost instantly. You submit your judgment about whether something is right or wrong, sinful or otherwise, to someone else. And you bind yourself to that person's judgment, even though it's uncomfortable for you. Even though you feel, no, he's not right, she's not right, it can't be true, I feel this, I can't go to communion, I must go to confession first. No, if X says what she did is not a mortal sin, do an act of contrition and go to confession, obey. And you should be cured within 1 to 2 weeks. Right, now my natural tendency is scrupulosity. But I just resist it. I don't need to see anyone or speak to anyone about it anymore, because I understand it and I understand its disorder, and I understand that I'm not going to allow my life to be dominated by it. But just get someone to walk with you who's experienced and intelligent, and trust and bind yourself to their judgment.
Rob, do you think that it's the lack of understanding of mortal and venial sin?
Yeah, because sometimes it is a grey zone. And when you're not sure what you've done is a mortal sin, then that's what you simply do there. And I had priests telling me this, and I wouldn't accept it at the time, but they were right. If you're not sure what you've done as a mortal sin, you do an act of contrition and you go to receive communion. Because you haven't satisfied the one critical element of whether the sin is formally mortal, that is full knowledge. All right? Materially, it might be mortal, but formally, it's not necessarily in your case if you don't have clear knowledge that what you've done is mortal. And if you're not sure whether you've done the sin or not, then you haven't done it. Because when you do a mortal sin, you know you've done it with certainty, with absolute certainty. Particularly if you've got thoughts in your imagination, particularly of a sexual nature, and images and thoughts, and oh no, I was thinking of this, oh, what have I done? Well, if you haven't consented fully, then no mortal sin. All right? If you're in the zone of what St. Francis de Sales calls delectation, something's delectable, you're contemplating the pleasure of it, but you actually haven't said, yes, I'll do it, or I want it. And it's only then that the will has become sinful. All right? We need to pray for Catholic teachers. What have been your joys and challenges as a high school teacher? What are the ways of dealing with children in high school? We need to pray for Catholic teachers, absolutely. And if you want to be one, go for it. Don't hold back. All right, we've got to storm the castle with as many people as we can. Some of you are going to fall, get knocked down on the way. Right? I've seen people driven out, destroyed. I've seen people despair, leave, but I've seen people climbing and keep climbing, and they get to the top and they're there, and they're doing great in our school system. My joys, I just love teaching. I had many challenges. I had challenges of my own lack of professionalism at times, my own experience, my lack of self-belief. I had to have, because I went from law to teaching without any formal training or qualifications. I had challenges of having too much work and too much power too early in my life, being made an AP after just 5 weeks in the job. I had challenges with lazy, corrupt staff. I had challenges of people who conspired repeatedly to destroy me, and it's still happening to this very day. Right? I trusted in prayer. When I was at St. Charles College, I used to say what I call the hot, sweaty St. Charles prayer. And I always invoked St. Charles to survive when I was under threat at St. Charles. I was unjustly given warning letters, especially the second one was terribly unjust, okay? But I survived. And I came out of the valley of St. Charles, and I'm near at the top of the mountain in Catholic education, RE in the Sydney Archdiocese, and that's only God's work, not my work. And one day when I'm finished up there, I'll go back down to the valley at St. Charles, and I hope to finish there. Cool. What are the ways of dealing with children in high school? There's one fellow in this room. Where's Fred?
He's outside.
Fred's, okay, stay outside. Fred's a great example. When I would start teaching a Fred, I just walk into the room, I'm not smiling. And I stay silent, I look at everyone with this stare, and they're terrified of me. And I do that for 15 minutes. And I say, I'm not teaching in a dirty room. I find a white speck on the carpet and I say, pick up that, put in the bin. And then I pick out the nicest girl who I know is really sweet, the best behaved, the most intelligent student. I pull her to the front and I say, look, I've heard things about you. I'll be watching you, sit down. And everyone's thinking, what a freak show. If she's going to do that to her, we're all doomed. Now that gets me 4 years of total control in the classroom. I don't have to shout anymore, don't have to abuse. I used to do that in the first 5 years, but after 5 years I worked out I don't need to have sticks and stones and belt people. I just use the eyes and silence. This is what I did to one student once. The student got out of the chair, put the paper in the bin, and sat back down. I looked at the student with a horrific look. Poor student, what's going on? What did I do? Did you ask permission to get out of your seat to put that in the bin? No. Get out of your seat now, get the paper out of the bin, sit down and ask for permission. So the student did that and sat down and put their hand up, and I said, no questions. Okay. But people like, you do that to people like Fred, and when Fred gets to year 11 and 12, then you become friends with them. You start joking and laughing, blah, blah. You relax a bit, because then you know you got control. The worst thing I ever saw a student teacher do was start in the classroom. He said, I'm here to be your friends. I went, oh gosh. You're not there to be their friends. You're there to be their teacher. Boom, 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 boom. Right? Afterwards, you become friends. I'm friends with Fred now. I consider Fred an equal and a friend. He's a great guy, great husband, great father, and he's here today. He's here with his wife. I mean, I can't even pull that off. All right? Okay?
And now you want to go to your daughter's...
Yeah, now we're going to go together to the Year 10 formal, hang out there, all right? Our daughter's going to really love that, all right? But that's what I mean. And the students will respect you when you are strong, you are tough, but you're fair. They don't like the teachers, they forget the teachers who are weak, they walked all over. All right? They respect and remember the teachers that were tough and fair and taught them something for life. Tradition has it that the male takes initiative to get to know a girl. Cultural tradition, not apostolic tradition. What is your view if the female was to take the initiative to get to know the male? Or would she not take that step? Look, I wish a girl came up to me once when I was looking for her. I used to always do it. I made a botched job so many times. I scared them, they ran away at times. Who is this guy? He's just so freaky and scary, and he looks desperate and sounds desperate. I botched it up so many times, it was terrible. At times I wish someone came up to me and said hello. Last time I was here, I made that joke about the Beatles. You know that Beatles song from Sgt. Pepper's album, 1967? You say goodbye, I say hello. I don't know why you say goodbye when I say hello. That's what it was like, you know? Okay, on a serious note, all right, let's give you a serious answer. What is your view if the female was to take the initiative to get to know the male? Or would she not take that step as he might not be interested and she doesn't want to deal with the rejection? No one likes rejection, males and females. Neither of them like rejection. I got a young teacher in one of our schools. She's 28 and she's stunningly beautiful. Very, very beautiful. And she said to me last year, Robert, I go to events and I see guys there and they're handsome looking guys, but they look scared. What do I do? And I said, you know why they're scared? Because they're interested in you. And they're afraid to go up to you because they're nervous. And they're afraid of being rejected. Because no one likes to be rejected. It's not just the girls who fear that, it's the guys who fear that too. You know what I said to her? When you see someone like that in the future, just go up to them and say, hi, I'm... That's all you do. Just say hello. Okay, you don't want to be flirtatious and you don't want to be throwing yourself at people and giving the impression that you're not you don't have self-respect. But for both of you, guys and girls, you see someone, you say hello. Look, I was rejected many times, and after a while, the pain goes away. I laugh about it now. You know, I don't mind because eventually it happened. All right, so you try. I have someone in my family who said, one day I'm going to get married, one day I'm going to get married, one day it's going to happen. No, that's wrong. It doesn't just happen. It never just happens. There's no day in the calendar that says you're going to get married this day. You have to make it happen. And if you don't take the initiative, then nothing will ever happen. So take the initiative, pray about it, but don't come across nervous and scared. Try and be relaxed. Try and start a conversation with something you've got in common, like I noticed this, or I see you support that team, or blah blah blah, or whatever. Start whatever, and just keep it going slowly and relaxed and whatever. All right, where are we? Was St. Joseph a widower? According to the Evangelium of St. James, written mid-2nd century, yes. Married previous, had children from that previous marriage, was much older than Our Lady, but that's not the formal Catholic position, okay? The formal Catholic position is much closer to the view that he was, yes, a Jewish man, older than the Virgin Mary, maybe late 20s, she's around 15, but the brothers and sisters of Jesus, we don't hold to be the children of St. Joseph from a previous marriage. They are the first cousins of Jesus, James, Joseph, Jude, and Simon, children of another Mary, married to Clopas. And the church fathers, particularly Hegesippus around the year 140, identifies Clopas or Alphaeus as the brother of St. Joseph. So that their brothers, literal brothers from the same parents, they both married women named Mary, and these children, James, Joseph, Jude, and Simon, and the unnamed girls are the children of Alphaeus, that is Clopas, married to Mary, and they're first cousins of Jesus, of Nazareth, the child of the Virgin Mary, conceived by the Holy Spirit. And St. Joseph was the guardian and the foster father of Jesus Christ. So, yeah, I think some of the Orthodox tend to follow what was said in the Proto-Evangelium of St. James, and they hold to that. That's not a heresy, but it would be heresy if you were to say that the Virgin Mary was not a virgin before, during, and after giving birth to Jesus Christ. The Lord's Passion was prophesied in the Scriptures. Judas's betrayal was pre-written. Why did Jesus choose Judas if he knew he would betray him? Did Judas have a chance, or was he destined to eternal damnation? Of course he had a chance. He was not destined to damnation. No one is destined to damnation. We're Catholics, not Calvinists. God has one will for humanity, that all be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. If people are lost, it's through their own choice, their own decision to reject what they know is good, true, and beautiful. And they're condemned for their own choice. Otherwise, our God would be an unjust God, would not be a Christian God, not the God of Jesus Christ, but worse than some of the pagan gods. So the question here is a mystery, really. Why does God create any person if he knows in his foreknowledge that that person's going to end up in hell? Better not to have created them at all. I mean, Jesus actually said of Judas, better if he was never born, which implies that he ended up in hell for what he did, dying unrepentant, dying despairing of having betrayed Jesus Christ. So, look, you can say that it was necessary for Judas to do what he did in order for Jesus Christ to end up on the cross and offer that sacrifice on our behalf. Okay? But at the same time, they're all free actors here. Whoever they were, Pontius Pilate, Caiaphas, Annas, okay, the soldiers that arrested Jesus, Judas himself, the disciples who denied and ran away, Jesus himself, all free actors here. Okay? There's no such thing as God predestined anyone to sin or to damnation. If you end up sinning, it's you who've willfully chosen to have done that act. And if you end up in hell, God forbid, it's because of something you chose to do, deliberately, consciously, with full knowledge and consent, and you died unrepentant. Should I continue to date my partner if we are at different levels of the faith? They struggle to understand deeper concepts. P.S. I won't say this. X, are you listening? All right, it's over. All right, no. All right. That was a message to someone in this room. I don't think I'd read that. But you can't expect both of you to be exactly on the page. If you are concerned about the disparity of the fervour of faith between you and your partner, then don't get married quickly. Give it time. Be patient. You can't drag someone to your level of spirituality. They have to come freely. And maybe you will not be a prophet within that relationship. Maybe someone else will come and inspire your partner to a higher level. Maybe what I'm saying today, right now, if these two people are in this room and that other person's listening, might help them. I know this from experience. I can say this safely, hopefully without getting in trouble. My wife and I are not on the same level of spirituality, but she's got the basics and she's growing. She's still growing, and I'm rejoicing in that. When you get married, you've got to have the basics. Pray every day, go to Mass every week, go to confession at least a few times a year, do good and avoid evil, believe in marriage, that it's forever, no divorce, no adultery, no contraception, no abortion. The basics have to be there. If they're not there, don't marry. But if you want your wife or your husband to be praying the rosary every day and doing these novenas every day and these devotions or whatever, and the same as you, you're asking for too much. Don't ask your partner to be the same as you. Ask your partner to be good, to be very good, to be great in their way, over time if necessary. Out of sensitivity, generosity, maternity, and receptivity, is there one vocation you find women are lacking?
They probably get virtue.
Oh, virtue. Is there one virtue you find women are lacking? Oh, look, I'll answer the question. I think women generally can be more prone to vanity and envy than men. Generally, with exceptions, both sides. There are plenty of men, I guarantee you, who suffer from vanity and envy. So, and of course, women tend to be a lot better than men when it comes to sensitivity, generosity, maternity, and receptivity. Absolutely. Okay? And this emphasizes my point that we are different while both being equally human in our nature and our dignity. And that men need women to help men to be better in these areas, while women crave for other qualities that men provide, that strength, right? That logic, that leadership, that clarity, okay? So, yeah, I don't want to be condemning women outright and saying you're more envious and you're blah, 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 and you're full of vanity compared, but they tend to, that's what my own observations with respect to those two areas. Which Christians believe in the rapture instead of Judgment Day? Well, it's generally Baptists from the United States in the 18th century onwards, and I used to associate with Baptists who believed in the rapture. There is a rapture, but not according to Baptist doctrine. The rapture occurs not before the second coming. The rapture occurs at the time of Christ's coming. Okay, it's not a premillennial or a pre-final judgment rapture. When Christ returns on the last day, when we read the first epistle of St. Paul to the Thessalonians, that's when people are taken up into heaven to meet Christ when he is returning. Christ has not come twice, a secret second coming and a public second coming. Christ will only come one more time in public, in glory, to judge the living and the dead, and there'll be nothing secret about it. All right? Why would God want to rescue Christians from a future reign and persecution of Antichrist when he didn't do that to millions of Christians who suffered in the Roman Empire, who suffered under Islam, who suffered in modern times and since the Enlightenment, the French Revolution, the Spanish Civil War, the Mexican Revolution and Civil War, the Nazi Germany, Soviet Russia, the Eastern Bloc, China, and continuing persecutions today. Christians are not being rescued. There are probably 42 million estimated people who believed in Jesus Christ, Catholic, Orthodox, or otherwise, who were put to death in the 20th century. Okay? Why would God want to rescue people from the ultimate act of worship, which is martyrdom, that we can give to God? From another's perspective, where should we look so that we don't judge? This idea that we don't judge is a misconstruence of the scriptures. Christ did not warn us not to judge. He said this, don't judge lest thou be judged. The standard by which you judge is the standard by which you shall be judged by. Meaning, he's cautioning us on how we judge. Don't judge rashly. Don't judge harshly. Don't judge unjustly. We're made to judge. We have an intellect. With an intellect, we know, understand, and judge. You're looking at me now and saying, I don't agree with you, Robert. You're judging me. When you say to someone, you should not judge, you're judging them for judging. If I judge someone for, okay, you're committing adultery, that's wrong. Don't judge them, Robert. But you're judging me because you think I'm doing something wrong by judging them. So it's not a condemnation. For many Catholics, the only sin is judging. But we're judged by them. I'm judged all the time by left-wingers, modernists, progressives, feminists, whatever. All the time I'm judged. Someone came into my office once because I spoke at a retreat against same-sex marriage, and a few weeks later, this person came in, how dare you have said that? You should not judge. Then you're judging me. Don't judge me. Next. She didn't have an answer. So why they judge us all the time? We can't judge the interior of someone. We can't go into someone and guess their motives and presume we know their motives. Only God can judge in the realm of the heart and the mind. I would say, look, that person's in danger. That person's walking the road to, moral danger and damnation. But I can't condemn them. That's left to God, right? But we have to judge things. If I'm a teacher, as a teacher, you have to judge in the classroom and say, guys, girls, this is right, this is wrong, this is what you do, this is what you don't do, these are the commandments, these are the beatitudes, these are the teaching of the church, blah, 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 blah. You have to give it like that. You have to make judgments. Otherwise, people come out of school with some amorphous mind, with knowing nothing black and white. Everything's grey. It's like watching Disney Channel all the time. All grey, nothing firm, nothing clear for people. Nothing to guide them in their lives as they grow up. I teach many students, and usually 80% of my class go against church teaching. That is, support gay marriage and embryonic stem cell research and IVF. Should I try change their mind or only read church teaching? You should do both. When you're giving them church teaching, you're trying to give a reason, explanation for what you believe in, what the church does. This is apologetics. You can't just roll over and say, guys, I give up. They're like this because they got no formation at home. Nothing from their parents. Before they came to you, they were in classes in front of teachers, in schools where they got more of the same, nothingness. They've been watching television, they've been watching movies, they've been formed by Hollywood, they've been formed by Twitter, they've been formed by Instagram, or whatever it is. And do you blame them for having this attitude, these beliefs? They're formed by the world. They have to be conformed to Christ. They don't even know who Christ is. They don't see the church as some form of divine teaching authority that's worthwhile. They look at the church as something boring, irrelevant, stale, hypocritical, corrupt. So, is that necessarily their fault? I would say not necessarily. We have to help them to see another side and give them the truth. I remember once I had a student in class of 97 who was very hostile to what I was teaching in the classroom. And you'd actually say it. I don't agree with what you say. 20 years later, around 2017, this same student came up to me at St. Joseph's Croydon when I was at my table selling books. He'd been married, he's still married, 3 children, and he thanked me for what I taught him because he had a massive conversion after he tried to commit suicide one day. And he thought it was miraculous how he avoided suicide. And you've got to teach them something, you've got to lay the foundations. I've lost count how many times ex-students came up to me and said, when you used to teach in school, we didn't agree with what you said, but we stayed silent because we were doing what you were saying not to do. We're doing the drugs, we're doing the sex, we're doing the violence, we're doing the gangs, we're doing the guns, we're doing all that. But you're right, Mr. Haddad, it was a dead end. It was a dead end in the end. They had something to come back to. One ex-student of mine was doing drugs terribly, and very wealthy student, would tell me, the problem with when I was doing all this stuff, I kept hearing your voice in the back of my head, and Mr. Wood's voice in the back of my head. Because what we did, we laid foundations, we gave them something, even though they couldn't accept it at the time, or they rejected it at the time, they had something that was laid. Any concreters here? We laid the concrete foundations. And you can bury them, but they're still there. And one day, when that person finally clicks, God's still talking to them and breaks through and they click, they've got something to come back to and build on that foundation. So don't give up if you're a teacher. If you give up, go. Don't bother. You're a waste of time. You're doing more harm than good. Have you heard of the Croatian War? Approximately 20 years ago. Yes, I have. It was a terrible civil war after the breakdown of the Yugoslav Republic, which was an artificial creation after World War I, merging Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Kosovo, Macedonia, Slovenia, all into one country, all these different ethnic groups, religious groups, and then after the fall of communism in Yugoslavia, these countries broke up and became independent, and then they began to fight over disputed territory, and it was awful. Yes, and sadly, it was a war between Catholics and Orthodox, and Orthodox and Muslims, and Catholics and Muslims. It was like our Lebanese civil war, but not as long, but more ferocious in its intensity. And if the Catholic Church had a role in it, funding one side or another, I don't know. I can understand why Croatians as Catholics would have got support from their church, as Serbians as Orthodox would have got support from theirs, and Muslims would have got support from their religious communities. Okay, it's not something I can comment on with great detail. I don't know enough facts. All I know is that this type of killing was extremely unfortunate. The atrocities that were committed were horrific. The concentration camps where thousands and thousands of Muslims were slaughtered in concentration camps was massively unacceptable and sinful. And Catholics killing Orthodox and Orthodox killing Catholics was a great, great tragedy and scandal. It should never have happened. That's all I can say. How do I know I'm doing God's will in my life? Well, you basically have an understanding of the faith. You basically know what's right and wrong. If you have a good conscience, an informed conscience, and you're at peace, then you're doing God's will. Okay, that doesn't mean you're perfect. If you're talking about a bigger picture about vocation, then you work that out one day at a time. Do what you're doing now and do it well, and be open to God's will about how the river of life goes. Okay? When I started as a 17-year-old in law school, I had no idea I'd end up as a teacher. When I started at St. Sharbles, I thought I was going to be there for 40 years. I had no idea I was going to be out in just 15. I had no idea I was ever going to get a phone call from Archbishop Pell and say, I'd like you to help me start the chaplaincy project at UC. I had no idea he was ever going to order me to do CCD. And for a few years while I was there, I had no idea I was going to end up in the job I'm in now. Right? God's will come to you sometimes very quickly and sometimes gently over time. You just be open to it and try and avoid any impatience or anxiety or stress about it. Because when you're impatient, anxious, stressful, that's not the Spirit of God working there. Okay? And if you're ever in something where you're not feeling content or satisfied or at peace, well, that's the way God talks to you to say He's preparing you to move you on. Like when I was at Westpac Legal Division, and that barrister said to me, here's this brief, look at it, let's make the woman an offer. We want to settle out of court. And I looked at it and I was going through one page at a time, only half knowing what I was doing. And when the barrister came back to me a few hours later and he said, well, Robert, what do we do? What do you think? And I said, let's make the woman an offer her $80,000 to settle out of court. He said very politely, Robert, we don't normally start that high. And I realised at that moment that my life wasn't going to be for Westpac Banking Corporation. My heart wasn't there. In fact, what I said, the words in my mind, I'm not giving my life to the kingdom of Westpac. Okay, I didn't know what it was going to be, but within a week after that, I had the job at St. Sharbles, not seeing it coming. Just be open to God's will, embrace it, run with it, but avoid any anxiety. Like when I was considering the priesthood in 1994, I ended up in a psychiatric hospital with depression. That was a clear sign in retrospect God didn't want me to go down that path. A good, a wonderful, magnificent, holy path for others, but not for you, Robert. You wanting it was your will, not my will, and I'll wreck your plans. You're going to end up in hospital, you're going to be miserable, you're going to be suicidal, and you're going to be on the rocks. But guess what? I'll pick you up again and put you back where you're meant to be. Back at St. Sharbles. Go back there. All right? Robert, can you find me a spouse? God. You know, I'll just let you know, this is my advertising platform. I've tried for others and I have a 100% failure rate. Do you still want my help? I've tried, it's hard work. I don't want to try anymore. It's hard work and it's stressful. And you need help. I understand why people need help. I said before, I wish I had help, right? But God helped me in the end. When I had given up, I'd given up. One friend of mine said once to me, Robert, you know, it's going to happen when you're not trying. That's what happened to me. It's going to happen to you the same way. And I thought, okay, it sounds nice. Thanks for being a good friend, but I don't really believe it. Guess what? That's exactly what happened. It happened when I wasn't trying. I got invited to a wedding of an ex-student, and it was the 28th of November 1998, 4 o'clock at St. Sharbles. I didn't want to go. Didn't want to go. When I saw the invitation on the desk that day, I said, I don't really want to go. I'm so tired, I've got a lot of things to do. You know, and then I had this egotistical thought, if I'm not there, she's going to notice. As if she's going to notice. Come on, it's an RCG wedding. There's 600 people there. I'm not going to be standing out. So I said, I'll go. And I'll do my holy hour, I'll read my book while during the red wedding ceremony. How about that? Gosh. Anyway, when I came out, because it wasn't a mass, you don't have mass for that. Just a wedding ceremony. So when I came out, I said, okay, I've got a break between that and mass. All right. I went out there and I saw this very attractive woman talking to my younger brother. And the first thing I thought was, oh, she looks nice. That was the thought. Oh, she looks nice. She's talking to my brother, so this is it. This is how God finally set it up. Because my brother was talking to her, I felt I could just join in the conversation. So I came from behind, started standing over and saying hi. You know? And then when I got home, I rang my younger brother and I said, that girl you were talking to, are you interested in her? He said, no. I said, like that? No. I thought, wow, that's strange. Okay, listen, you do me a favour. At the reception, can you arrange, because he knew her and her brothers, can you arrange that I sit with them at the reception? And so when I arrived at the reception, there was a seat right next to her. Fantastic. We spoke for 5 hours. We've never had a conversation that long ever since. 5 hours. And at the end of it, I had enough confidence and I was relaxed enough to invite her to go to the U12 formal with me. What a great romantic event. Would you come with me to the U12 formal, you know, at St. Charles? Okay. That night was a disaster, but it survived. Do Protestants believe in masculinity and femininity? Of course, most of the reasonable ones would. I don't see why not. If so, what do they believe? I'm not sure. It depends on the denomination. Some of the more liberal Protestants, like liberal Catholics, have just gone off the edge and support gay, lesbian marriage and transgenderism and all that, okay, which we can never support, though we love all people, and we love them, we want them to go to heaven, and we advise them to live chaste, moral lives. None of this, bashing gays, hating gays, this is rubbish, this is not Christianity. Okay, no, homophobia, well, what does that mean? But whatever it is, we don't engage in that. We love people as children, natural children of God, and we want them to be faithful, supernatural children of God, and that is by being faithful to God's plan for life, love, which is, sex is only meant to be between a man and a woman, in the context of a marriage, that's freely entered into, exclusive to all others, lasts until death, and is naturally open to life. Only that's from God, only that's moral, and that's for all people. And if they can't fit in that, well, it's our moral obligation to help them by God's grace. And I know more than enough people who used to be in gay marriages, gay relationships, hundreds of different partners who are now happily married in a sacramental marriage with a woman and have children. And that's only by the grace of God. And that's our mission to people who are same-sex attracted or whatever. Masculinity and femininity, they're good, they must be reinforced, and they have their value, and I've said that multiple times already. What's the time? 11:30. Let's see what I can do. Where do you draw the line with a man being a leader and a man who is exercising control? Well, you can't be a dictator. You've got to always be consultative, and it's a partnership, and you always have to take the other person's view on board and admit when you're not right. I'm still struggling in that area. All right? I'm a bit dictatorial, and sometimes I'm a bit black and white, and I say, no, that's it, boom. But that's when the marriage is not at its best. The marriage is at its best when big decisions are made as mutual decisions in partnership, and both have their insight, and both, if they're reasonable and they care and they're loving and they're respectful, they agree to, compromise. Okay? That's how it has to be. And so in some areas, my wife is emphatically right, and that's it, let it go, she's right. In other areas, I'm emphatically right. And in the big picture questions of the house and the marriage and the family and the home and all that, it has to be a partnership. Have to agree. Some of my worst decisions have been when I've said, this is it, this is what I'm doing, end of the story. And always it's a disaster. When it's a mutually agreed upon decision, it's normally successful. And it's fruitful. And we're in it together. Like we've just renovated the large parts of our home. Nothing was done by me only or her only. Everything we did was agreed upon, and it's going really well. Okay. Women who suffer greatly with polycystic ovaries or endometriosis, can they take the pill? Yes, because they're not taking it for contraceptive purpose. The pill is only immoral if it's taken for an immoral purpose, which is contraceptive purpose. If it's taken for these medical reasons, it's not an immoral use of that pill. All right? Freeze the eggs, I don't know about that. I'd say at the moment, no, but I'm not an expert to give you a definitive answer about that aspect. How do you approach young mid-aged guys who are prideful and tend to judge easily? How do you approach? Well, gently, just say it to them. I don't think you should say that. I think perhaps, you should consider this, or don't judge, don't be quick to judge. And, only God knows the hearts and minds of people. These type of guys, they've got a lot of energy, a lot of passion, a lot of enthusiasm, and they say things, because they're rightly motivated, but they can tend to come across as know-alls and judge harshly. I've been there many times. I understand the question, and many times I've been gently corrected. Don't harshly correct them. When you get married, don't ever correct your spouse in an angry tone of voice. You won't achieve anything. My wife always gets what she wants when she asks me nicely. It's simple. I need to be corrected. I need to be, put in my place sometimes. And it's always best when it's said in a nice, gentle, loving way. We're getting there. I am experiencing homosexual desires. Is there a place for me in the church? Absolutely, because you're just a human being with a disorder, and every person who's a member of the church has disorders in their sexual appetite. Or your role in the church, you're called to be a faithful child of God and a member of the church, but you're called to practice chastity as everyone else, heterosexual otherwise, is. All right? And God will not just, if you're faithful, God will give you the peace of heart, the peace of mind, the peace of body. When you're raised by God and given the gift of chastity, you're not someone who's always on the edge. Oh, I have to have this sexual, I have to do this, I have to do that. You have a peace of the dominion of the Spirit over the body. Do you think that lack of catechesis and of my peers make it harder to come to church? Probably. Are you being mocked, laughed at, marginalised, criticised, attacked? Of course that's going to make you harder for you to come to church. Because you don't feel loved, you don't feel respected. We all got crosses to carry. And you've got to respect each other as human beings. I've told you some of my crosses. And I've been mocked. You got mental health issues, Robert. I do. But, you got a moral issue if you're going to make fun of me because of it. You've got to look at each other with that love and respect and work together despite your own weaknesses. And everyone else has weaknesses too. What are some Bible verses that disprove sola scriptura? Well, I think it's a question of understanding that Christ did not just give us a Bible. He didn't give us a Bible. He gave us a church. And that is a teaching church where he said, I'll send you the Holy Spirit to teach you all things and to remind you of everything that I've taught you. Okay? And he said to St. Peter, feed my lambs, feed my lambs, feed my sheep. When you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. I give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven to bind and loose whatever you decide on earth. You see, there's a teaching authority there. It's not just a book in my private hands for me to interpret myself. There's some remote verses that tell us that how did Christ set up things? He didn't just hand out Bibles and say, hey, read it for yourself, let the Holy Spirit help you to understand it. No, there's a community first he established, a teaching authority, and through that he inspired the written word of God. So the Bible belongs to the church, and it's up to the church to decide what's in the Bible, how to understand it. Okay, how to interpret it, etc. And of course, that other point I made earlier, the contents page, that proved this. The formation of that contents page is enough to disprove sola scriptura, because there's nothing in the Bible to tell us what should be in the Bible. What tells us what should be in the Bible? Who authored the contents page was an authoritative church. If the appropriate Jewish consequence for blasphemy was stoning, why was Jesus crucified? Because the Jews could not execute Christ, because when the Romans had authority, this was called the jus gladii, the law of death. They reserved it to themselves. If the Jews could exercise the law of Moses here, they would have stoned Jesus to death. But because the Romans were in power, Pontius Pilate, procurator of Judea, the Romans reserved to themselves the right to execute. And their mode of execution, in this case, was crucifixion. Two more and then we're finished. What is the link between the Feast of Passover, Passover lamb, Feast of Unleavened Bread, Last Supper and the crucifixion? That's 2 hours to explain. They're completely interlinked. Basically, even though it was a Thursday night, the Last Supper was a Passover meal. Normally the Passover meal happened on the Friday night before the Great Sabbath. Okay, but Jesus was following the calendar of the Essene community. He did it that night. He transformed the memorial meal, the Jewish memorial meal, which reenacted the escape from Egypt, into a new Passover event that enabled humanity to escape from the slavery of sin. Okay, and in the Last Supper, we can presume that they didn't eat the roasted lamb, because the lambs weren't sacrificed in the temple until the following day, so they wouldn't have had a lamb to roast and eat at the Last Supper on the Thursday night, and that was replaced by Christ himself as the Lamb of God when he gave the Eucharist to the disciples for the first time. Okay, I could say a lot more than that, but lack of time. All right. Finish. Last question. Did Satan believe that he has defeated God via the crucifixion? Didn't he know that Jesus would rise from the dead? No, he didn't know. In fact, this is a great, this is the great way in which God fooled the devil. The devil was egging on, Caiaphas and Annas and all the Jewish authorities to destroy this faithful man. The devil couldn't get dominion over him, tempted him but didn't win. And so he cajoled all these other characters to destroy this faithful Jew, not realizing that this faithful Jew, through the crucifixion, was actually offering to the Father that sacrifice on behalf of humanity that would liberate humanity, redeem, take humanity out of the hands of the devil and give humans the opportunity once more to be under the dominion of God. It's only at that point that he realized his own error, that he'd been the strategy outsmarted him, he'd been, outflanked, and it was too late at that moment. Okay? We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.